This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm joined today by Michael Ivey in Asheville, North Carolina, and Chris Weinert in Detroit, Michigan. We're here to bring you all the news you need to know. Among the most interesting developments, clean house of every last Trumpist. Biden urged to keep a firing spree going by sacking Social Security holdovers. This is really something. After President Biden kicked off his White House tenure Wednesday by sacking several, and this is coming from Common Dreams, which is a far-left website, holdovers from the Trump administration. Progressives are urging the newly inaugurated president to keep the firing spree going by terminating his predecessor's right-wing appointees at the Social Security Administration. Linda Beschel, communication director at Social Security Works, told Common Dreams Thursday that while the Deputy Commissioner of Retirement and Disability Policy, Mark Wachowski, a longtime proponent of even stricter eligibility requirements for disability benefits, has resigned. Others, Social Security Administration Commissioner Andrew Saul and Deputy Commissioner David Black, remain in their posts. So they're going to work at getting Donald Trump's cronies at the Social Security Administration out, claiming they're undermining our Social Security system, including underpaid tens of thousands of beneficiaries. Ahead of Biden and Harris's inauguration, Social Security Works, which is a website, led a coalition of progressive organizations demanding the new administration remove Saul Black and Warshawski immediately upon taking office and reverse their destructive attacks on the beloved New Deal program. In that case, the High Court, by the way, ruled last June that the CFSC, the structure was unconstitutional because it protected the agency's directors from at-will termination by the president. Next stop, Social Security Administration. This is a curious case to me because I actually am in favor of the Social Security network, the social welfare network, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, workman compensation. To that extent, I'm all with the Biden administration. But here they're going after the Trumpsters. Michael, your thoughts?
Well, the word purge comes to mind, but the Social Security Administration, I really don't know what issues that there might be conflicts about with Trump people and the people that they're purging from there. You probably know better than I do, but shouldn't we be referring to him as Generalissimo Biden, as one who would take over a third world banana republic coup?
Yeah, I think so. We ought to give him a bunch of ribbons and medals, and keep the military behind him on every occasion. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I tell you, after that inauguration and the pageantry behind that, without any actual people in audience, that was pretty interesting to see. I keep seeing social media being engineered too, as far as like the metrics and lack of support for this man. You can actually see thumbs down going down throughout time. So it's just like the Biden votes going up, the lack of approval in terms of social media, and those metrics are being managed in terms of perception as well. I think it's interesting that let's just say that if Trump came in 2016 with the same sense that the Democrats greeted him with in terms of resistance, and put out some sort of list like AOC has put out, or others like an enemies list, and better yet, especially in the face of what the Obama administration had done in terms of purging actual patriots for 8 straight years. Say if Trump came in and actually did something like that, and many say that he tried, I think that it would have been certainly gaslit with the full strength of the media in Congress as well. Very similar to that Capitol, whatever you call it, insurgency, that production that they're putting on. That's all part of the UN colonialization effort. It's a tactic. It's a liberal agenda thing. And really, it's these multinational lawyers putting or pivoting the focus away from themselves. And this is really a way of preemptively putting some sort of resistance against resistance, we'll say, in terms of Wall Street and this hostile takeover. So I think that, Biden, after this coup, comes out and preaches unity while they're purging the people like this. It's the same hypocrisy and inversion that they always put forth, where they say they're seeking peace while they're punching you in the face and stealing your wallet, but somehow or another you're supposed to be cool with it.
Get this, the White House has taken down its own inauguration footage because it was getting a massive number of dislikes.
Right, I heard that.
How fitting is that?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Biden abolishes female sports champions. This is really outrageous. Biden unilaterally eviscerated women's sports. Any educational institution receiving federal funding must admit biologically male athletes to women's teams, women's scholarships, women's locker rooms, women's showers. This is a destruction of a great institution, moving backward. Meanwhile, here's another oddity. The Standard Hotel, which apparently was a gay bastion, is going down, given the Democrats' preoccupation with lesbians, gays, and bisexuals and transsexuals. Standard, with a heavy heart, announces its closure. Despite 22 years of unconditional love for our hotel, our guests, our team, and community, we're unable to prevent a significant increase to the lease. I believe the owner, it mentions here, is tied to Abramovich and sold a couple of years ago. Meanwhile, just to show where they're going, Merrick Garland is being appointed AG. He's been obsessed with taking our guns. Democrat President Biden appears to be doubling down on his commitment to trample the Second Amendment, tapping Obama's failed Supreme Court nominee Merrick Garland to be in charge of the Department of Justice. In 2000, Garland voted to allow the FBI to retain background check records on American citizens for up to 6 months. In the 2005 case, Seeger versus Gonzalez, D.C. Circuit Judge Garland successfully voted to dismiss a challenge to Washington, D.C.'s unconstitutional handgun ban. Years later, the Supreme Court voted to uphold the sanctity of the Second Amendment in Columbia versus Heller by a 5-4 margin, thanks in large part to the efforts of the late Justice Antonin Scalia. Garland voted to rehear the case, at the time named Parker versus the District of Columbia, signaling support for return to unconstitutional firearms restriction. He would go on to vote in 2012 for a preposterous 30-year minimum for individuals who commit automatic firearm offenses. Under Garland's ruling, prosecutors would not even have to prove the defendant was aware whether the firearm met the court's definition. Concerns about Garland's anti-Second Amendment track record have been cited as a key factor in the Senate's refusal to confirm him to the Supreme Court in 2016. Biden's fanatical blueprint for taking away Second Amendment rights includes a promise to defeat the NRA, ban the fictional category of assault weapons, limit the number of firearm purchases that can be made by an individual, ban all online sales related to ammunition and spare parts, and a ludicrous proposal to allow only smart guns to be sold to the public. I mean, this is really bad, and I expect we're going to see it in his next round of executive orders. Michael.
Well, this is one of the main tenets of their ideology, of the people who presumably have just taken over the executive branch. And Merrick Garland is yet another of the many Zionist dual citizens of Israel that Biden's appointed to take over the executive branch. So how should we think of anything other than this would happen? Relative to the executive order about women's sports. You used a phrase yesterday or the day before that I liked a lot, Jim, and you said it was the triumph of ideology over biology. That's a good phrase in that context. Isn't it it's total insanity, of course. And I was curious, isn't it a principle of one of the main satanic Kabbalistic ideologies that sex polarity is wiped out for some form of hermaphrodism or something like that?
Michael, it's got to be something like that. This is so bizarre. And it's offensive to every normal American citizen. 80% more, 90% Americans would object to this as completely ludicrous. No common sense, no decency, embarrassing young. I can see millions of young girls refusing to go to school just because they don't want to be embarrassed by having boys be in their locker rooms and their showers with them. Michael.
Absolutely. Much less the abject unfairness of having males compete against them in sports. This has been actually going on for some time now. I guess it got dialed back a little bit in the last 4 years, but it was really going strong during the Obama years. And I remember not only seeing parents of girls who had worked their asses off in their sport, whether it be soccer, basketball, and then to be confronted with a guy who's 6'4" and outrunning them on the track field or something, so that they don't get what they worked for.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a clip of a basketball game, a high school basketball game, and one of these teams had like a 6'6" big hulking male in the center who got on the team because he said he was a woman.
Oh God! Michael, this is idiocy. Chris, your thoughts?
Wow. I have a lot of them, and I just have to say that the whole point, it seems to be, is like this perception management and inversion of morality, the weaponized hypocrisies, the politicized, departmentalized sexualities of people and the identities that are manufactured and socially engineered into these expectations through Hollywood and through magazines and through many intelligence agency sponsored outlets. I have to say, part of the hypocrisy is to offend the common onlooker by these absurdities. That is the point. So that it does trigger people like you and myself, and people that have some sense of conservative basis. That is really the point in the two-party theatrics that is being produced here. So as far as like women's sports, you can probably look to prominent figures like Bruce Jenner or Michelle Obama to lead the charge. I don't think it's necessarily fair to other women that actually put their entire lives into training only to go and compete against some man and throwing the shot put who could arguably step on his own penis while he's throwing it. Pretty crazy. Just crazy. So I think it's an attempt to really bring us this death in better hands. And here's another thing: the drone strike presidents and all the ilk that come along with them somehow want to gaslight you about morality and these things about disarming you from weapons. But arguably, you could say that genocide and the economic destruction of this country is far more dangerous than any gun could ever bring forth. We've had guns for 240 years, and it wasn't until these people really pushed this crap through with Congress and through these economic means, through all the same central bankers, the World Economic Forum, to really crush the citizenry, and then to push this vax program on in front of this as a resolution to the absurdity they created in the first place. This is a complete shit show, and I just have to say they have to be called out for it. This coup cannot be tolerated. It cannot stand.
As Mao said, the party must command the guns, lest the guns command the party. Check out on the Second Amendment and in the politics of gun control. Jim, the conspiracy guy, you'll see why it's so absolutely crucial that we maintain our right to keep and bear arms. Meanwhile, there's this controversy about the transition in relation to the Pentagon, which I believe has an explanation. The effort to obstruct the Biden team is unprecedented. The Pentagon blocked members of Biden's incoming administration from gaining access to critical information about current operations, including troop drawdown in Afghanistan, special ops in Africa, COVID-19 vaccine distribution, according to new details provided by transition and defense officials. The effort to obstruct the Biden team, led by senior White House appointees at the Pentagon, is unprecedented in modern presidential transitions and will hobble the new administration on key national security matters. Biden openly decried the treatment his aides were receiving at the Pentagon in December, calling it nothing short, in my view, of irresponsibility. After meetings were canceled ahead of Christmas, he said his people were denied information on the SolarWinds hack, need a clear picture of our force posture around the world and operations to deter our enemies. But persons involved with the transition gave Politico a more detailed picture, saying briefings on pressing defense matters never happened, were delayed to the last minute, or were controlled by overbearing minders from the Trump administration. Defense has traditionally been a bipartisan business between and among professionals. This is terrible optics for those who want to copy this pettiness in the future, said Mackenzie England, a fellow at the Conservative American Enterprise Institute. Effort to block the transition from key national security information is useless, poor form, and horrible precedent. It's very, very interesting what's going on here. I believe it has a deeper root that I shall explore subsequently. Pentagon spokesperson Sue Gao said it's understandable for there to be limits on what sensitive and classified information the department can provide, including future military operations, defended the president of career civilian council as observers during meetings with the Biden team. But I think this has to do with the state of the union and a transition from being a corporation to being a constitutional republic where the military is actually in charge. And I just mentioned here now, in relation to this photograph, I've made quite a point of the fact that it appears to me that on the first debate, they brought in a different Joe Biden, not the original guy. He's got a narrower skull. He appears to be somewhat younger. He has a more cleft chin. He has brown eyes rather than blue. His ears don't attach the same way because Joe Biden had ears that turned up where they connected to his skin and pendant hanging down, which is not present here. But also, I offered that in relation to body language, that Jill Biden with Joe always was beaming, just totally admiring of Joe. They always walk hand in hand, arm in arm, and he always had this shit-eating smile on his face. When she was with the body double, however, it was completely different, not hand in hand, not arm in arm. He didn't have the smile. They both looked kind of mildly concerned they might be outed. And I just say that's emphasized here. He's been sworn in as president of the United States, the greatest moment of his history. Jill, if this were the real Joe, would be looking up at him beaming, and she is not. I tell you, further confirmation, that's not Joe Biden. That's a body double, and they're both mildly distraught over it. Michael, your thoughts?
That's a good observation, Jim. Yeah, as we were discussing before, there are several very anomalistic things going on. Speaking of the uncertainty about whether this administration is working with the military or not, did you guys see that picture of when Biden was taking his inaugural stroll and a huge section of the National Guard turned their back to him?
Well, that may be standard security because you're guarding them against a crowd, see, so they got to be watching the crowd for threats. So I don't believe, but there's this interesting one, just to show how he's following demands. He walked by Marines and he said out loud, salute the Marines, which he didn't do, meaning he was just repeating the words. He thought he was supposed to say them instead of executing a salute. I mean, how bad is that?
Yeah, another thing about the identity of this guy who just got inaugurated. Did you guys see this story about a man who was the 6-year stenographer to Joe Biden, named Mike McCormick, was being interviewed live on Newsmax the evening of the inauguration, and he said straight up, my astute friend in Texas told me about this. He said straight up, that's not the Joe Biden that I know. And he's not saying something good about him. He was saying something like he didn't speak in the same cadence. And if a stenographer is somebody like a court reporter,
Yes.
who takes down everything around, I was married to a court reporter, and believe me, they pay strict attention to everything that comes out of a person's mouth.
Yeah, this would be a great expert witness to refute the claim that this is the same guy saying this is not
this guy
Joe Biden. That's quite
this
different.
guy was saying this guy has different speech patterns than the Joe Biden I know.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Very good. Chris.
Well, I couldn't quite speculate on whether this is the real Joe or the fake one, or I do notice the similarities and the differences you guys are pointing out, and yeah, there does seem to be something there. The only thing I know is that I'm training my daughter at a very young age that if she ever sees that man, to run the other way and scream for help. I just have to also say that, looking at some of the things that Biden's putting on, whether it's the warp speed, whether it's the ridiculous absurdity of the vax, the Build Back a Better Build-A-Burger program, putting Yellen in charge of the Treasury, the sound money principles being thrown out the window, the monetization of debt, they Pedostar war games in the incestuous and let's say even pedophilic relationship with the military, the politicians, and the bankers through these contractors, through Wall Street, through these law firms that make these things like these Swiss foreigns and these foreign companies that are headquartered overseas for tax loopholes with foreign owners, very similar to like the Federal Reserve, we'll just say. It allows them these luxuries to risk transfer and to really focus or to misdirect the focus of ownership towards proxies like the people we're seeing and really going after in terms of the common men. I have to point out also, you're talking about the clones or whatever's going on with that. I have to point out the Black Eye Club. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that or not, but like all these people seem to have like a black eye at some point in time on the same side. McConnell, Obama, Cho, Gates, the Royals, all these guys, it seems like
Chris, you mean their iris itself?
No. They have a black eye. Their whole eye is black and like they've been hit in the eye.
Like they've been hit.
Like there's a Google Glass imprint maybe or something like that. I don't know. Something like a database or a thumb drive they put in there. I have no clue. Something that, I couldn't quite tell you, but I'm just speculating here and kicking the tires on this, in terms of shooting the breeze and talking about these observations and seeing what you guys say.
What do you think it could mean, Chris?
Well, I think that most of these people, like even Pope Francis, look at all the people that have this. Bush, they're all part of this cabal, the syndicate. I don't know. I think that's probably a good dead giveaway. Maybe is that if the royal families had it, Rothschilds had it. A lot of stuff. So
something related to that is something that Jeff Rentz is promoting. He doesn't promote the idea of a body double, but now he's promoting the idea that there's some sort of nanotechnology that was inserted into Biden that caused the old Biden, who couldn't put a sentence together, to be quite lucid when he had the first debate.
That's unnecessary when the simpler explanation is it's just not the same guy. It's obvious it's not the same guy. The stenographer. This guy couldn't be a better witness, Michael, to this. This is a wonderful proof because it's not just visual. It's got to do with the speech patterns, which are not amenable to transference from person to person.
Right.
Well, how do we get to the bottom of this is the better question. Do we DNA test the guy or do we turn him loose in a middle school or what?
Look, I made the argument from the beginning. This is a way of invalidating the election because they ran a fraudulent candidate. They have lost by default, and Trump was president, and it was never argued. It got up to Sidney Powell and the others who knew, but it was never deployed, which has very much distressed me.
It seems to me, Fetz, that like they're trying to dupe people by this fraud, this perception management and manipulation, where if people will apply their own free will and allow themselves to be manipulated by their deceptions, then they'll be audacious enough to sell them to them all day long.
Hey, Chris, I think you had a great idea for a test right there. Just bring a couple of 8-year-old girls and stand them in front of him and see what he does.
I don't think we should stake him to that stake, but I agree. There's something's got to be done to get to the bottom of this.
Well, it looks as though the public is rejecting them, with all those dislikes
The
on
court
the
of
White
public
House
opinion.
website for the inauguration. Trust in media has hit a new low. Many news professionals want to do something about it, but I think it's long gone. Trump did a brilliant job of calling out the fake news. Faith in society's central institutions, especially government and the media, is the glue that holds society together. That glue is visibly dissolving a decade ago and is now, it appears, disappeared completely. By the numbers, for the first time, fewer than half of all Americans have trust in traditional media. Social media, too, has hit an all-time low of 27%. 56% of Americans agree that journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggeration. 58% think most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than informing the public. When Edelman repolled Americans after the election, the figures had deteriorated even further. 57% of Democrats trusting the media, but only 18 of the Republicans. Look at this and how much it's related to their attacks on Donald Trump, which have been so baseless and fabricated and ridiculous. The numbers are echoed across the rest of the world, mostly not a function of Donald Trump's war on fake news, but I believe it's been a major contributor to the realization. As vaccine rumor hunter Heidi Larson put it, we don't have a misinformation problem, we have a trust problem. News organizations have historically relied mainly on advertising, as though dollar flow increasingly to Google and Facebook. That created institutional weakness showing up in trust data. Reversing the decline is a monster task. The catch? It's now a central part of many Americans' personal identity. What they're saying? Former Financial Times editor talks of factual reporting as a means of regaining the trust of the people. Axios, to help restore trust in fact-based news. Washington Post. Our goal should be beyond merely reporting truthful information in front of the public, do our best to make sure it's widely accepted. What does that mean, make sure it's widely accepted? How it works. Media outlets can continue to report reliable facts, but they haven't been doing it forever. CEOs are at or near the top of Edelman's list of trusted institution. By the numbers, 61% of Trump voters say they trust their employer's CEO. That compares to 28% who trust government, 21% journalists. The bottom line, CEOs have long put themselves forward as the people able to upgrade America's physical infrastructure. Maybe they now need to work on the civic. But, they've earned this state of disrepute. It's so disgusting, the propaganda we get every single day, from every media source. It's disgusting beyond belief. They've earned this contempt. Michael, your thoughts?
Absolutely. I've been calling them the propaganda ministry in practically everything I have written for the last 8, 10, 12 years, somewhere in there. But it's a very positive sign, those numbers that you just reported there, that there's that many people who distrust the media. If the numbers are correct, with 43% of Democrats think that only 43%, no, it's 43% of the Democrats say that they think the election was stolen, and 82% of Republicans. That adds up to 62% of the entire population don't trust what they were told about this election. Michael Rivera has a slogan that he uses periodically, and it is, the best way to expose a tyrant is to force him to act like one. So this stolen election experience may have been that point at which the majority of Americans finally get it and come to an understanding that the mainstream media is not just corporate propaganda, it's the deadly enemy of a free people.
Well said, Michael. Chris?
Well, I think a lot of people are just fed up with the bullshit altogether and the theatrics of the two-party paradigm and how it's been utilized to really lower the status quo and to diminish our expectations from the government. I think that really they're running out of excuses, and they have, in fact, deserved that contempt that they've greatly earned by really just damaging their credibility on all fronts, whether it's the intelligence agencies putting out things like MK Ultra or Mockingbird, or even with what's gone on with like, Pogo and Zephyr and some of these other things, independent media. There's been a strong effort to undermine the truth, and as you know, truth is often the first casualty of war. As somebody that's fought their whole life trying to really stick up for the truth or get to the bottom of the truth in the face of the official narrative, it's good to see the amount of people that are really starting to wake up to this and question what is being slopped onto their plates. So yeah, good stuff there. I also like to point out that the fact checkers that seem to be coming out of the woodwork and backing up and lying and basically the mainstream media lies and they swear to it, and Fangs and all these other janitors that are cleaning up these crimes and really putting these favorable narratives onto these criminals, they are almost accomplices or accessories to like some sort of a malice of forethought crime. If this was like something that led to a homicide, it would be they'd be culpable in first degree murder, and obviously they've led to the deaths and wrongful deaths and the premature deaths of several millions of people, at least by shutting down the economies and running them out of their essential and non-essential businesses, if not isolating the elderly from their family under the guise of this COVID hoax or the vaccine or the other things that are being put on, or just these wars in general that are always there to deliver the illusion of democracy for the sake of the 1% that run both sides of the political spectrum, both sides of the controlled opposition dialogue. So I think for the first time, these guys are really facing a lot of heat. And it's probably the first time since the 30s. And I wouldn't be surprised if they resort to something terrible. I wouldn't be surprised if the false flags just started increasing tenfold in the face of this awareness, just so that the people understand and so that they can make what is understood not be discussed in terms of resistance. So that's really the point too, is preemptively, destroying any hope or spirit for resistance. And I think Trump represented a lot of that in terms of a populist movement. And it's always been their goal to destroy any populist movement, whether it's Sanders or Trump or Perot or Nader or any of these people. So yeah, that's a big point there.
Nice, very nice. Just illustrating the points you're making, America has a gross misconception of itself. What Japan thinks I, America, do. What Korea thinks I, America, do. What Vietnam thinks I, America, do. What Iraq thinks I, America, do. What Pakistan thinks I, America, do. What Yugoslavia thinks I, America, do. What Afghanistan thinks I, America, do. What I, America, think I do. What I, America, actually do. Truly, we need to come to grips with reality. And the media could assist us in that process if they would only speak the truth. I want to explain here now that it appears to me the situation we're in is very, very different than portrayed by the media, that Donald Trump has actually carried us from 1871, when the United States became a corporation. When the United States became a corporation out of necessity, we were bankrupt after the Civil War and negotiated with the British and European financiers, using the nation itself and its population as collateral, where it appears that Trump has perceived the depth of the problem, and by virtue of his background as a businessman dealing with corporations, he has dissolved the corporation and had its asset directed to the constitutional republic. Check it out, because I believe this is the case.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here with a late night emergency update on the 19th of January. It's not quite midnight yet here. It will be after midnight by the time I get this posted. This is an extremely important video, and I want to share this with everybody just as soon as I possibly can here. As you guys know, I posted a new interview tonight with my good friend Charlene Bollinger, and I do advise that everyone listen to that. Spiritually, it's very uplifting because one way or the other, God is in control. Having said that, everyone must listen to this fantastic interview by Scott Kesterson with Jim Pugh. This is on the Bards FM YouTube channel, and it is a must hear. Now, Jim Pugh has expertise in banking, And you might say he's involved in the invisible hand to save our republic. This interview encompasses the Act of 1871, and it's couched around the absolute 100% fact that we have had an illegal corporate government controlling this nation for decades. And as many of you are aware, Washington, D.C. is a state unto itself, just like the Vatican. And in fact, the Vatican influence over Washington, D.C. cannot be overstated. Friends, I want to play just a small portion of this interview for you right now.
The premise is that in March of 2020, by the enacting of the national emergency and FEMA taking in charge, the governmental authority over the corporation side of things was transferred to FEMA. And they assumed the duties of the government at that time. Now, why do I say this? Well, you take it up to July the 4th. July the 4th, in Trump's speech at Mount Rushmore, he signified that we, the people, had got back our government. That was very interesting. Now, not saying exact words that he used, but in essence, that's what he said. And right after that, you would find Melania's tweet saying the same thing. That was a signal that said, guys, we've just moved to the Republic. And from that point forward, if you look at what's happened, and knowing the fact that basically we're fixing to hit the ground running, and we don't have to transition from a corporation to a republic, there's be no waiting period. There'll be no major transition period. It's my premise that basically on that date, Trump and the military became the governing body over the republic. And at that point in time, we had two governments.
So right now, what we're faced here is I'm going to use the term kabuki theater, because literally the people, and maybe this explains the importance of the Trump base standing up and voting in mass, the people that stand with President Trump, which is 80 million plus at this point, against a government that has only authority by perception and illusion of control. Is that fair enough?
Sure, that's absolutely true. And basically the people of the United States need to understand that if they don't stand with Trump, then they're slaves to a corporate entity.
Let me explain a bit more of why I believe this to be the case. Here's another report. Like many of you, I'm in shock today because of the inauguration. And then I realized why it had to happen, and that Q has told us it would happen and why it needed to happen. Q told us a scare event would be needed. Well, are you scared yet? Q Post from October 7th, 2020 told us of Biden being sworn in, and would the countries he took bribes from then be in control of the government? An important point to which I shall return. Biden had to take a private jet to Washington, D.C., was not sent a government plane. This is the first time in history it's happened. Again, I'll get back to it. Many of us were assured when Trump and those in his administration were referring to the next administration, it meant the military. We expected him to step down while all this went down. Trump did say that the next administration would take over at noon today. Like many, I thought this was over when Biden was sworn in, as he now become the commander-in-chief. Boy, was I wrong. Because of the fraud, the military has the proof. They have the duty under military code to remove the false government and restore a new legal civilian government under military code 11.3, which triggered when Biden was sworn in today. There was a fear in the McCarthy era that the communists could take over our government. So provisions were put in place for the military to protect us should that happen. These provisions allow the military to take control while they remove the belligerent government and restore a legal civilian government with the military running elections to do it. Literally, the military was put in place as the last line of defense of the Constitution should an illegal government be installed. That's why they didn't send a government plane for the president-elect. because they know he is not a legitimate president. And once sworn in, the government became illegitimate, belligerent, and the military is now responsible for restoring legitimate civilian government. Otherwise, foreign powers will gain control. Q said the end wouldn't be for everybody. We have been told by Trump, Flynn, and others that America would soon get a lesson in the Constitution. Well, folks, effective at noon today, when Biden illegally swore in with the assistance of foreign nations, he just made the government illegitimate and effectively put the military in control. So, while, like many, I thought it was over when Biden was sworn in today, I realized Q told us it needed to happen for the military to assume control without it being a military coup, where Q said it all had to be done by the book. Here's a message from Alan Howell Parrott to Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney and Major General Paul Valley, which I believe also indicates what's going on here. All seems to be going according to plan. Did you watch President Trump's farewell speech? Notice the flags behind Trump? Gold fringe flags, the symbol of the corporation. He accepted the loss of the corporate presidency without actually saying that he conceded. His presidency in the Republic is still intact. He vacated the White House, allowing Biden-Harris a smooth transition as promised. They will find out that wanting it will not give them the satisfaction they expected. The U.S. corporation has been legally shut down as of January 19th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, a minute before midnight. The corporate members in the U.S. were not informed of this, as they still need to complete the steal. The subcorporation states, counties, and cities are now headless. The steal will be completed tomorrow with the inauguration of Biden-Harris. Harris resigned her former position, which already is dead as far as powers go, and both will be assuming president, vice president positions in name only with zero executive power. He can sign all the executive orders he wants after the inauguration. They are only words on paper without authority. January 19th, 2021 was the last day that the corporate positions of president and vice president carried any executive power. And Trump, Pence are still in those now worthless positions until noon of January 20th, 21, namely the inauguration. Documents for the legal termination of the United States of American CAPS, meaning the corporation, were filed in London 18 months ago with a shutdown date of January 19th at 11:59 p.m. This allowed time for the Chapter 13 bankruptcy proceedings to be completed prior to the shutdown deadline. The Republic of the United States of America was a sole beneficiary of the assets of the bankrupt corporation. Now, here's another interview where several who have been commenting on what's going on update what's taking place.
And Simon, hey, it's an honor to be here with you, man. I'm a big fan of yours as well as Charlie. So
that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's 100% true, man. But I wanted to say, I don't know if you guys noticed, and I'm sure you did, but the whole inauguration, everybody from Obama to Hillary, Bill Clinton, all of them looked so despondent. It didn't look like a victory inauguration. It looked like they lost. I mean, from every single one of them, they had no life in their eyes. They looked like their body language was depressing. It looked like they were at a funeral. That's what I saw.
It's really interesting because that goes to a question or a debate I had this morning. And I was saying, for whatever we think of these people, these bad people, they're not actually totally stupid. So they must know there's something here. And yet they still turned up. They still turned up. And I thought, A, because they've got nowhere else to go. And B, maybe if the piece of cheese is big enough on the trap, they've got to walk into it. But I totally agree with you. There was no relief or excitement. It really was, they were looking over their shoulder every 5 minutes.
This is something that was sent to me just now.
Okay.
The farewell speech had gold trimmed flags. He is transferring administration out of the District of Columbia, where the corporation was formed. and it will gain power by Biden tomorrow and will be considered a hostile relationship between the state of an occupied territory and the occupying power, which is why they have all the troops there. 11.3 following that by his executive order of 2018 on seizing of assets. Well, DC has been fenced in, so it's now regarded as a foreign territory with foreign assets. And this has caused foreign interference in our election. They can seize everything and anything from the candidate that certifies or is part of the certifying of a fraudulent election. This will all go out in the public view, and we'll have no communication from the president because the military is now in control due to the Insurrection Act. Biden will be virtually inaugurated into this foreign entity, and the US Marshals will seize everything and hold tribunals at the Capitol, which is why the tents are set up as a makeshift prison. Trump will be sworn in as the 19th president of the 1776 Constitution on March the 4th. Hence the flags now on the Capitol.
I don't want to declare everything he just said is correct in every detail, but I would observe here. You have Joe Biden, what's supposed to be the Oval Office, versus Donald Trump. But look outside the window, there's a parking lot. There is no parking lot outside of the Oval Office window corresponding to what we see there. This appears to be a virtual administration in more senses than one. And I also believe it explains why there's hostility between the Pentagon and the Biden administration, because the Pentagon is actually in charge. The Biden administration just hasn't figured it out yet. Michael, your thoughts?
Well, Jim, it's hard for me to know what to think about this information like this. A lot of it goes hand in hand with the anomalies that we were talking about earlier, and it seems to hang together logically, but it's an extraordinarily optimistic scenario, and frankly, I'm a little gun shy about stuff like this now. It brings to mind the old saying, "Fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me," and the fact that all this good stuff that's continually talked about, it seems to be always put out to a future date somewhere. So I just don't know. I'm in a wait and see mode.
Very appropriate, Michael. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, the deep state has no problem with that either. They want you in that wait and see mode. They want you waiting for the man. They want Q to trust you to trust Q's plan. I think Q's been a psyop. I really think that I hate to say it, but this whole thing seems to be the deep state regulating the deep state as it always has done. You know, whether it's after World War I, World War II, going into Vietnam, or any of the War of Terror, any of these things. It seems to be the same goal. So I want to point out, do you think that really the money and the foreign interest and the investment firms and the Wall Street connections and these lawyer firms that like, you know, Milbank or DLA Piper or Sullivan and Cromwell or Kuhn and Loeb or Drexel Burnham or BlackRock or Blackstone or any of these companies that have taken control of the military and taken control of our finances and our economic system, do you think these guys are going to give the power back to the citizens? Or do you think, more importantly, that they're just trying to restore their credibility in the eyes of the citizens and really lend them a new offering that is more, I'd say, more enslaving than the old one? If you look at the social
Good
contract
point.
tracing, crypto, all these things, man, it seems like they're taking, the only assets I've seen being stripped are the citizens. You know, I don't see this coming from so yeah, until I see it, I'm gonna have a hard time believing it, and especially after everybody keeps moving the goalposts and the yardsticks and changing the rules while the game's going along. No, I'm done playing along with this stuff, and I'm going to say
Great point about the financial institutions, Chris. And I want to ask you a question. So, if it's the case that it's all a psyop, what do you make of guys like Simon Parks, Charlie Ward, Robert David Steele, who seem to be continually buying into that and passing it on to people who believe them.
Well, I could explore their connections to the intelligence agencies. I think all of them have in some way, shape, or form, whether they're direct agents or working as an agency for these people, have connections to this. So I have to say, the burden of proof should be on them, not on me. I think that they've really exhausted their credibility in terms of that. And what with the Mantis guys going to sort this out, or whatever. I mean, come on, man. I believe what's in front of my face and what's real, not the bullshit they're trying to feed to me here. And I'm done playing games with my own hope and my own thing. I'm going into this with the expectation that both sides are trying to screw me, and if they don't, I'll be pleasantly surprised rather than utterly disappointed.
Well, I totally respect both of your position. I think you're on very solid ground in terms of your reasoning. Corsi, of course, General Thomas McInerney, and I myself have been inclined to believe that this is in fact what's going on. So I wanted to lay it out here. And if I'm wrong, I will be glad to admit it. And we're going to find out in short order. The estimate is this is a 30-day game plan, which I believe is already in progress, and that the resistance of the Pentagon having to stage signatures in the Oval Office are among the signs that, in fact, the Minority Report in this instance is right. Meanwhile, a Georgia congresswoman believes the Parkland school massacre was a false flag planned shooting. I'm a huge fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a new Republican congresswoman who's declared that the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland was a false flag operation. I've actually demonstrated it. I have a book about it. I brought experts together. Several have responded to the Post to claim the pension was a payoff. Greene expressed her agreement with the comments. This is to Sheriff David Israel, who kept his people out because they had a player inside using a sim gun firing simulated ammunition. He didn't want the guy firing the sim gun to be shot, so he kept his deputies out. It's called a payoff to keep his mouth shut since it was a false flag planned shooting. Her controversial comments were met with waves of condemnation, including from politicians, officials, and families. Here's a Fred Gutenberg, father of a allegedly 14-year-old victim, who published a blog about it. This is a photograph of the school where David Hogg played a key role. He actually, in an interview 6 hours after the March for Our Lives, told CBS that he'd gone home because everyone was released at 1 p.m. that day because it was Valentine's Day. And then he got on his bicycle and rode back to school because he had to be there, not adding the words which were implied because it was a staged shooting and he had a role. Here's what the father of an alleged decedent, but I tell you, they forgot to put up the obituaries. I've got this one nailed. The conservative businesswoman has also expressed support for QAnon, which claims that satanic pedophiles control the world. Well, maybe not quite the whole world, but according to Jim Rothstein, 70% of the political elite in America is engaged in pedophile. Meanwhile, she's also filed articles of impeachment on President Joe Biden. I've been upset to lose my past favorite political figure from Hawaii, but now that she is stepping down, I think that this woman is going to take her place. Marjorie Greene, I am very impressed. Your thoughts, Michael?
Well, that woman is wonderful. She also, I don't think you mentioned it right there, but it's in the story that it flipped me out when I heard that she directly called out Parkland as a false flag. And then she tosses in Sandy Hook. She's very fearless.
This is my kind of woman.
My kind of woman. Of course, both of those are one of the many bullshit staged events that this production crew went all around the country staging during the Obama administration. The numbers on the mass shootings during the Obama 8 years just skyrocketed, and they're all for the these false events. And she's just great. It reminded me of one of my favorite quotes by any politician anywhere, and it was by George W. Bush when he said, "Our enemies never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we."
I know.
No,
That's more
no,
false
no.
than any man in Congress.
No truer words were ever spoken by that particular president.
Chris, your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's maybe a good thing to finally see that that women are getting past the psychological operation and like the invoking of emotion, the sympathetic or the empathy of the situation would cause any mother, any woman with a maternal instinct to immediately put herself into the position of, say, a parent or a child, or one of these situations that really most people in the heartstrings are connected to, and that's a good part of humanity. But the bad thing is these evil people that are putting these false flags out there are the ones pulling on those heartstrings for this reason, to weaponize them against people like yourself and others like Wolfgang Halbig as well, and Jim Tracy and others that have called out not only the BS behind Sandy Hoax, but also the Parkland Douglas thing as well. And that's another thumb in the eye to Wolfgang Halbig. I think that used to be his territory down in Florida, if I read correctly.
Yeah.
So man, this is really something that seems to me like they're trying to trigger and gaslight the people that are on this in terms of conspiracy theory, and then turn that focus of public opinion towards yourselves and others that are being portrayed as monstrous for suggesting such a possibility. So I have to really look at, they question your decency for standing up for the right thing, while really subverting decency by putting this thing out in the first place, and then doubling down on this with the full strength of the media and the scene actors, as we're seeing, like David Hogg or Posner or some of these other fools. So yeah, truly, I don't know how much they're getting paid to sell out their country and sell all of humanity for this thing, but wow, this is truly overwhelming to see the amount of elaborate intentions that are put into these hoaxes and perception management in terms of trying to confiscate our guns or take away our constitutional rights.
That was a wonderful commentary, Chris. And I've been so disappointed to see Tulsi Gabbard stepping out, but now I see Marjorie Greene stepping up, and I'm very, very impressed.
Is Tulsi actually resigning her position?
Yeah, she's getting out.
Well, I bet the DNC's doing that to her. This seems to be like a departmentalized thing where they're going after the women in the DNC, and they want the Stepford wife to go mindlessly along with this COVID thing, the gun grab, the whole liberal agenda. It seems to be the thing. And I could see Tulsi having too much of an independent mind and too much of a backbone to really be compliant with that. I could see her maybe going to the Republican Party, in all honesty.
Yes. Well, look, we're in a situation where the Republicans want to revert to their country club banker, atmosphere. They really never were enthusiastic about Trump supporters. And you got the Democratic Party going full socialist communist. There's room here for a third party. I would call it America First. But it looks as though it may be called the Patriot Party, that already has 75 million voters to support it. So I believe we're at a time of realignment in terms of American politics. And if you can just get rid of the goddamn voting machines to have honest election with paper ballots and hand counts, it will be revolutionary.
Good points there. Hey, can I jump in and say that you're bringing up some great points? As far as the disaffected in terms of the two-party system, and really just the people that are seeing through the whole theatrics as well, there is such potential energy that can be harnessed by a populist leader or a movement that really looks out for humanity. And it's up to really the people to decide what that movement will be. And I don't think the CFR and AIPAC are going to deliver it to us, at least not as a Trojan horse or a poison apple or anything else other than.
It's going to be a real populist party, and
Oh yeah, Nader talked about that.
Donald Trump transformed the Republican Party into a populist party, but there were always old guard members, even including Mitch McConnell, who didn't like it. I mean, they went along with it, but they stupidly didn't foresee or anticipate the best interests of the party were with Donald Trump and not with the bankers and the financiers.
Yeah, they definitely showed their allegiances, and this has definitely been a removal of the mask, so to speak, and definitely, they're showing who's who, across the aisles, the things that they agree on. should be the things that we're looking at and with some severe scrutiny, because the things they disagree on are just things to really divide us. But you look at the stuff that both sides come across the aisle to work towards, whether it's impeaching Trump with the 26th Amendment, whether it's funding Israel, they always have these goals that they can somehow come across the aisles to agree on. But as far as delivering anything to the people, it just seems to be the tug of war, the struggle.
Nice, very nice. Meanwhile, Twitter refused to remove child porn because it didn't violate their policies. Twitter reportedly told the victim of child sexual abuse a video of his ordeal circulating on the platform didn't violate the platform's policies, according to a lawsuit filed on the victim's behalf. The victim, anonymized in the lawsuit as John Doe, alleges Twitter allowed the video of his abuse filmed when he was 13 years old to accumulate hundreds of thousands of views. Twitter only eventually complied after an agent from DHS got involved in the case. The video had already accumulated over 165,000 views. By the New York Post, Twitter refused to take it down because it couldn't find a violation of the company's policies. The federal suit filed by the victim and his mother alleged Twitter made money off the clips, showing a 13-year-old engaged in sexual acts, a form of child abuse. The teen, now 17, who resides in Florida, identified only as John Doe, between 13 and 14 years old, when sex traffickers posing as 16-year-old female classmate started chatting with him on Snapchat. Doe and the traffickers allegedly exchanged nude photos before the conversation turned to blackmail. If the teen didn't share more sexually graphic photos and videos, the explicit material he'd already sent would be shared with his parents, coach, pastor, and others. Doe, acting under duress, initially complied, sent videos of himself performing sex act, also when told to include another child in his videos, which he did. How disgusting is that? Twitter won't allow Donald Trump to stay on, but they'll put up child porn, and it's abusive. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans are negotiating the terms of the Trump impeachment trial. Talk about your traitor. Here he is in full dress. He disgusts me completely. Mitch McConnell. The arguments in favor of a post-departure Senate trial are convoluted, whereas the arguments against simply looks at the text of the Constitution. There are arguments that in a small number of non-presidential cases, the Senate attempted a post-departure impeachment, but they're not really on point because the Senate, on a small number of prior occasions, may have unconstitutionally grabbed power. It doesn't justify doing that again. Two wrongs don't make a right. The New York Times reports Senate Republicans are negotiating the terms of this unconstitutional trial for Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, that he planned to ask Democrats to delay the start of the trial until early February to allow Trump's legal team to prepare a defense. The proposal emerged as McConnell and Chuck Schumer haggled behind the scene over the timing and structure of the proceeding, and Pelosi refused to say when she transmit the impeachment charge to the Senate. Once the trial gets underway, lawmakers in both chambers agree it should move quickly. Still bitter over the length and repetition of last year's trial of Mr. Trump, senators were closing in on rules that would compress the meat of the trial to 3 days of oral presentation. But it's all completely disgusting. Pelosi has claimed she's going to send it over on Monday. Ceremonial requirements, deliberation, and votes would add several days, but it would be the speediest presidential impeachment in history. The timeline could balloon if either the House managers or Trump's defense team asked to call witnesses. And obviously that would be appropriate because the Capitol Hill riot had nothing to do with Donald Trump. There was no incitement. They're going to have a very difficult time proving that anything Donald Trump said was the remotest incitement. We already have testimony from James, the brother of Jonathan Sullivan, that Jonathan led 226 Antifa members to the Capitol, and it took place before Trump supporters had arrived from the ellipse. This is just disgraceful, Michael.
The Twitter story for social networks that gigantic to openly allow child porn like that, in my mind, lends credence to the proposition that some form of satanic inner core that enjoys pedophilia and maybe even child sacrifice is running this world at the present. And Biden is one thing, but when I look at Kamala Harris, I get a really bad feeling, especially when I see her talk or laugh. So that's just an intuitive thing.
Well, she's totally vapid. She's brainless. This is a utterly insignificant person, and that she should be put in this position of power is a manifest absurdity.
Well, somebody chose her, and they chose her for a reason. It might have to do with her being her complete fealty to Zionism. I don't know, but there's something even deeper than that, I think, from my intuitive feeling. The story about Mitch McConnell and the continuing impeachment trial, I don't even understand the point in doing that. What point is there to going through a trial when a guy's already out of office?
It's not even constitutional. There's no purpose to it whatsoever. You're absolutely right. What they're after is this: they fear Donald Trump, and they want to have a trial so they can impose a punishment that he can't run for federal office again. That's what this is all about. He wiped him out in the last election, and they're trying to make sure it doesn't happen again. They live in dread of another Trump candidacy.
Well, it might be the case that it also lends credence to that scenario that you were presenting earlier about the real, not the corporate entity, but the real republic out there, and some people knowing about it and knowing that Trump is a major actor there. I don't know, because it's still just for him, his running for something else like a House or Senate seat or something like that doesn't seem like enough of a motivation to me for them to go to this length to demonize him after he's out of office.
And of course, in the context of Biden claiming he wants to unify the country, what could be more divisive than to have a punitive second impeachment of the president no longer in office? I mean, it's just insulting. It's gross. It's corrupt. It's stupid, manifestly stupid. Chris, your thoughts?
I think it's kind of funny how Biden is preaching unity after he pretty much comes away with this coup and hostile takeover and really against the will of the people. Supposedly now he wants the will of the people to stand behind him in the decorum of the office after supposedly the people who, let's say Trump had the support of the people, and yet after 4 years of sandbagging his entire administration, now all of a sudden he wants us to line up behind him. That's pretty interesting. As far as you guys are talking, this reminds me of like in the Holy Roman Empire, the cadaver synods, where popes and anti-popes have these type of things where they just humiliate and try to run their reputations to the ground in terms of like the future legacy or past nostalgia for their reign, so to speak. I think that if you look at the censorship and the degree of this that's going on, these guys, the deep state has no problem censoring people like myself and others that are trying to call these things out in real time. Yet they have absolutely no ability to go after the child porn and the stuff that is not only illegal, immoral, and just disgusting. So I think that really a big part is to gaslight it and to invert us and to really debaucherize us into this outrage. And then when we finally lose our SHIT, then we're demonized as terrorists for supposedly not complying with this lunacy, this absurdity. I think if you look at the structures that have been put in place, especially like you're talking in California, whether Pelosi or Newsom or Willie Brown or Jerry Brown or any of these lifetime actors, they've really had a scene management there to control the Rothschild investments. If California was its own independent nation with the intellectual property and the stuff that it has, it would be the 5th largest national GDP on earth. So there is a goal to hijack the West Coast by Rothschild, to take it away from America and really to break apart America, I think. So, I'm really worried about this new republic thing and like I said, Rothschild rebranding it and taking control of it like they did after 1776 with the banking system and buying back the Continentals, or even like after the Civil War with the Reconstruction era and the Railroad era and the robber baron, the Gilded Age. So yeah, there's a lot of concerns that I have, because like every 50 years, these guys, they damage their credibility so bad in the face of the public opinion, they have to rebrand it in some level like this and lend the optic or the illusion of diligence to restore the trust from the people, or else their whole system collapses.
Very, very nice, Chris. Very nice. Meanwhile, we want to hear from you. Send fan mail, pro or con, to live.needtoknow@gmail.com. Live, needtoknow@gmail.com. Here's one of the commentators on my blog today. I'll read: Biden is signing a bunch of executive orders. Oh, okay, sounds bad, right? It's all illegal, null and void. It's only a movie, Jim. Sit back and watch this slapsticks Keystone and grab your popcorn, as all the movies are illegal based on fraud of the election from what Trump signed in September 2018. Any foreign or domestic interference will have their funds frozen. In addition, the U.S. corporation was sold in 1871 and Trump reversed it. The inauguration is null and void since there's no U.S. corp to have standard practices. Yes, Trump took off since he's stepping away for a bit, since the military is taking over and executing the Constitution, like what happened on the 31st of December, 1776, for 30 days. People forget about history. In my opinion, having guests on your show stating doom and gloom adds nothing to the show, as some of the patriots feel that way since they're not trusting in God. As you know, it's not about your Republicans and demo rats, especially when 70 to 80% are corrupt. It's about good versus evil, God versus Satan. The military behind the 200 generals, General Flynn, Q Intel, I know you're not sold on that, as Carl Herman has been spot on. You said it would be a movie and it would play out not on our time wanted, but the necessary time needed. The stage is set. Action is now happening on film for the world to see. It's illegal and the crime is being caught on tape. Trust the military to keep we, the people, the Constitution alive and well. The final clue that this isn't over: the amount of dollars and effort spent on expanding Gitmo. Sincerely, Sean. Has anyone noticed Joe's eyes have become slits? I think he's turning Japanese. I really think so. Remember that tune from the Vapors, Trumpster and Melania jetting off into the Florida sunset? 25,000 troops come in and wall off the seat of government. Creepy Joe and his scumstration records the inauguration before the 20th. No one there seems all that jazzed. I think it's brilliant. Trump, the whipping boy, fades away. In his presence of no one to flog, they don't know what to do with their whips, so they start cracking them, pushing deprogramming for Trump supporters on the simulated new network. And the demolition party digs a grave deeper and deeper. The brutal, unpopular things they will try to cram through will just prove how evil they really are. Every Trump traitor will show their true colors, thinking they're safe now that Kumala over her will be the prez. Weekend at Bernie's. Bernie looks more alive than Biden. Here are some thoughts about the two different guys. These are not the same person. Meanwhile, there was a Japanese official-like guy sticking with Biden throughout the inauguration. Very, very strange. Maybe it represents he's a representative of Red China's investment. Meanwhile, Jim Stone, skeptic, do not believe anyone who says trust the plan or there is hope. The only hope is the American gun owner, which will do nothing. I just hope there are few people who want to do a little well-directed long-range house cleaning. Anyway, consider this. The communists have infiltrated America so badly to enforce a stolen election, they were able to shut down every court, every governor that mattered, every media outlet, even Newsmax, maybe pumping BS to re-legitimize themselves now that the coup is complete, so it doesn't matter. And now America is hoping the military will save us when Obama purged every last American loyalist out of the leadership and did nothing to fix it because Jared was his primary advisor. Dream on. The military will do nothing. Rather than let spurious hopium drug you into inaction, get moving and at least bug out or prepare to bug out the moment the power goes out. If the power goes out, it'll be one message: time is up. Things are going to be moving very quickly, very soon. Communists smash it down quick. And many, many, many of them in various positions have called for the destruction of anyone who refuses to accept the official lie. Very sobering. Meanwhile, I got this message from Rob W. about Need to Know, the 20th of January show. Fetz, I share your pain and despondency. soonest, while it's fresh in the mind, I think it needs to be discussed about why President Trump did not use the Insurrection Act and take all the measures he had to stop events. Also, why Steele and Parks appear to have been selling a line of false information for quite a while. Maybe one or both would like to be on your show. Further, Q needs to be addressed in clear terms. Giuseppe, I fear, may be right in his statement that the plan maybe did in fact work out perfectly. For the discussion on Trump is relevant as so many, including me, place such faith in him, believing that he would not, while he had the means available to prevent it, abandon the American people to an unconstitutionally installed Biden. Dark times are here. Tyranny is being installed. Thanks, Rob. Meanwhile, just a reminder, the actual results of the election, where people in Germany saw this before the Dominion servers were seized, practically a grand sweep, Trump 410 electoral votes, Biden 128. Meanwhile, let me remind you how to legally decline a vaccine. Step 1, do not refuse a vaccine. Otherwise, you'll be considered belligerent. Instead, you can politely decline the service by doing the following. Step 2, ask the doctor, does the vaccine have MRC5 in it? They all do. These are aborted fetal cells and other DNA. If the vaccine contains MRC5, you have the right to decline. Step 3, also ask, is there the possibility of and the L should be replaced by an iatrogenic reaction, an adverse reaction caused by multiple compounds or drugs interacting with each other from the vaccine. They all do. When the doctor says, yes, it does, that's your get out of free vaccine card. Thank the doctor for his offer and walk away. Remember, doctors have sworn the Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm. They must honor it. This is how we can legally and respectfully decline their offered mandated services. There's absolutely nothing they can do about it. Now you know. Please share with everyone you care about. It's not coincidental that all corporate media are all in to facilitate the demand and fear that Democrats need in order to achieve their objectives. Thus, there's an alignment of all big government institutions and multinationals to support the same. Nothing is coincidental. Everything is political. It's not about the virus. It's all about control. There we are. And for final thoughts, Michael, yours.
I just watched a video last night. There was another staged thing where I think it was a politician in Brazil or somewhere in South America getting a vaccine, and it was so obvious. I think they actually put a needle in this woman's arm, but what was so obvious was that there was nothing at all in the syringe. It was already pushed all the way down when they put it in. So these are interesting times that we're living in. So I would just, as a final word, remind everybody to breathe deeply, take a long walk, preferably in nature if you can, and don't wear a mask. Exercise your ability to smile. Don't socially distance. Exercise your ability to hug people who will hug you. And there's two things I would like to recommend to people. One is there is now a Jim Fetzer channel on the Odyssey video hosting site, and everything that goes to the BitChute channel is automatically loaded there as a backup. And their search engine is much better. So if you go to the Odyssey site and just put in Jim Fetzer channel, you'll get it immediately. And the second thing is that I just discovered a great website called idonotcomply.org. Just no dashes or anything, just idonotcomply.org. It's dedicated to the resistance to the tyranny that's being imposed on the people of the world using this COVID-19 pandemic as the Trojan horse. Great site.
Well, I'm just delighted to hear about the Odyssey Channel, Michael. That's great news. I'm just delighted.
Yeah,
Here
Larry did that.
Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, thanking Michael Ivey from Asheville, North Carolina, and Chris Reinhardt from Detroit, who is the source, the embodiment of brutal honesty, for joining me today. I don't believe I'm naive, and I appreciate the power of the arguments, reservations, and caveats we've heard from both Chris and Michael. But I do believe something's going on behind the scene. I do believe that the Donald was in the perfect position to take a corporation established in 1871 and take its assets and convert it back to the constitutional republic. I believe that has happened. And I believe the consequences are going to be enormous. I believe the military is in control. I believe the Biden administration is only starting to begin to realize that the situation is not at all as they have supposed. The situation is, in my opinion, playing out. I still trust the plan. We'll be back on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great weekend, and we'll see how all of this plays out. The fate of the nation hangs in the balance. Thanks for joining us here today.